Alex had never been to a planet like this before. He had traveled to many worlds in his time as a diplomat, but this one was different. The city he arrived at was grand, filled with towering structures made of shining stone and glass. The air was filled with the sound of soft chimes, and the people here walked with a certain grace, as if they were part of something far bigger than anything Alex had ever seen. The palace where the conference was held was even more impressive. It was as if the entire building was made to show off the wealth and power of the royal family.
Wow.
Guards in their shining armor stood like statues, and everything about the place was elegant and perfect. Alex, however, was not there to admire the beauty of the palace. He was there to represent Earth, and he had a mission to complete. As a human diplomat, Alex knew how to blend into foreign environments. He had met many people from different cultures, each with their own ways and traditions. He had trained for this, learned how to speak their languages and study their histories. But no matter how prepared he felt, there were always moments that made him nervous. One such moment came when he was given the task of delivering an important message to the royal family. It was meant to be a simple task: walk through the palace, find the right room, hand over the message, and leave. Easy, right? What Alex made. The mistake of getting lost in the labyrinthine halls of the palace. There were so many doors and corridors that it felt like he was walking in circles. His map, given to him by a palace servant, seemed useless. It wasn't long before he found himself standing before a grand wooden door. It was far more impressive than anything he had seen before. Must be the right room, Alex thought, feeling confident again. He reached for the door, thinking it would lead him to the royal chambers. What he didn't know was that this was not just any room. This was the princess's private changing room. Without hesitation, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by candles, and soft music played from somewhere hidden in the background. The atmosphere was calm, peaceful, and luxurious, with velvet cushions and silken curtains decorating the space. But none of this mattered at that moment, because the moment Alex stepped in, the room fell silent. A group of women stood in shock. They were the princesses of the planet, and they were not dressed for the public eye. The youngest, Lyra, was in the middle of tying her gown, and the others were either brushing their hair or adjusting their outfits for the upcoming event. But now, all eyes were on Alex. His heart skipped a beat. Oh no, he thought, his face turning red. What have I done? Before he could even say anything, a loud voice boomed from across the room. Who are you? The voice belonged to the eldest princess, Cerise. She was the most powerful and the most feared among the royal family. Her gaze was fierce, and her posture was commanding. Alex opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mind raced, trying to figure out what to say. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to? Cerise interrupted, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing with anger. You've just walked into the most private part of our palace. Do you realize what you've done? The other princesses seemed just as furious. Do? Two of them stood with their arms crossed, glaring at him, while one was fidgeting with her gown, clearly uncomfortable. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Alex could feel it. I'm really sorry, he said, finally managing to speak. I was looking for the royal chambers to deliver an urgent message. I didn't know this was your private room. Cerise raised an eyebrow. Urgent message? She looked to her sisters, who exchanged skeptical glances. From whom? No? From Earth, Alex said, hoping that would at least make some sense. He wasn't sure it would, but it was the only truth he could give them. There was a long pause as Cerise studied him. You're a human, aren't you? Alex nodded. Yes, I am. My name is Alex, a representative of Earth. The princesses' faces softened just slightly, but the tension in the room didn't ease. They exchanged glances, unsure of what to do with the human who had barged in on them. Finally, Lyra, the youngest princess, stepped forward. She was the one who seemed least affected by the situation, and her curiosity was evident. Earth, Lyra said softly. I've heard of your planet. You're known for being, well, not very advanced compared to us. Her tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. But you're still here, in our palace. You must have something important to say, Alex swallowed. We could feel the weight of their eyes on him, but Lyra's tone was different from the others. There was something about her curiosity that calmed him, even if it didn't fix the mess he had created. I do, he said. The message I was supposed to deliver is important. But I didn't mean to interrupt. Lyra smiled slightly, a curious glint in her eye. It's all right, she said, her voice almost playful now. Perhaps you're more than just an accident. Perhaps you've come here for a reason. Alex blinked, surprised by her change in demeanor. Was she really? Not angry? Why don't we figure out what to do with you, human? Lyra asked, her tone warm, but with a spark of mischief. Maybe you'll be useful after all. Alex wasn't sure if he had just been forgiven or if he was in even more trouble. But one thing was for sure, he had caught the attention of someone. Much more important than he had realized, and he wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad one. Alex sat in a quiet room within the palace, nervously tapping his fingers on the smooth stone floor. He had been waiting for what felt like hours, unsure of what would happen next. His mind kept going back to the moment when he had walked into the princess's changing room. It felt like a dream, but he was certain it wasn't. The angry stares, the shocked gasps, the commanding voice of Princess Cerise still echoed in his head. But then there was Lyra, the youngest princess. Her curiosity had caught him off guard. She wasn't angry. She hadn't scolded him like her sisters had. Instead, she looked at him with something different in her eyes, something like wonder. Why? Alex wasn't sure, but he couldn't help but feel that she saw him as more than just an intruder. After the incident, Alex was escorted to a private room where he was told to wait. The guards were stern, but they didn't treat him like a criminal. He had expected worse, especially since he had entered such a private space. Yet, something about the way Lyra had spoken to him lingered in his mind. Was she trying to be kind? Was she actually interested in him? The door opened suddenly, breaking his thoughts. It was one of the guards who had escorted him earlier. The man's serious expression didn't change, but there was no anger in his eyes. The princess requests. Your presence, he said. Alex stood quickly, relieved that the princess hadn't forgotten about him. He followed the guard down the long hallways of the palace, trying to keep his nerves under control. His shoes echoed on the marble floors, and the silence around them made everything feel even more tense. 8. The palace was beautiful, but it was also intimidating. They reached a door that was much less grand than the ones he had seen before. It wasn't guarded like the others, and there was no sign of royal power. Instead, the door felt more normal. The guard knocked gently, then pushed it open. Inside, Princess Lyra was sitting by a window, looking out over the city below. The view was breathtaking, tall towers stretching into the sky, surrounded by gardens and shimmering rivers. But Alex's attention was focused on her. She turned around as he entered, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. Alex, she said, her voice calm. Please, sit down. He did as she asked, feeling awkward. As he sat on the plush chair opposite her, Lyra seemed completely at ease. Her posture relaxed as she studied him. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Alex wasn't sure what to say. He had been summoned, but he didn't know why. Are you still angry with me? Alex asked. Hesitantly, his voice quieter than he intended. Lyra shook her head. No, I'm not angry. At least not anymore. I wanted to talk to you, Alex. You're different from what I expected. Different? Alex echoed, unsure what she meant. Yes, Lyra replied, standing up and walking toward a small table in the corner of the room. She poured 2 cups of tea and brought one over to him. When I first saw you, I thought you were just another human diplomat someone sent to do a job, but now I'm curious. Most humans I meet are so focused on their own world, but you're not like that. Alex took the cup of tea from her, surprised by her kindness. He had expected the princess to be cold and distant, like her sisters, but Lyra wasn't like them. She had a warmth that was hard to ignore. I don't know what you mean, Alex said, feeling a bit awkward as he sipped the tea. It was warm and fragrant, calming his nerves slightly. Lyra smiled, a soft expression crossing her face. You didn't come in here with a sense of fear. You didn't apologize for being human. You just ... acted. I admire that. Alex couldn't help but chuckle, though it was a bit nervous. I think I was more surprised than anything. I didn't mean to make an impression. I just wanted to deliver my message. I know, Lyra said, but that's what makes you different. You didn't bow down or hide. You stood there, as if you belonged. She paused for a moment, her expression becoming more serious. I want to know more about you, Alex. About Earth, about what drives you, what makes you a human. So bold. Alex blinked, unsure how to answer. He had never really thought of himself as bold. He was just doing his job, trying to follow the rules. But in this room, with the princess looking at him so curiously, everything felt different. He had never felt this kind of attention before, especially not from someone of royal blood. Earth isn't perfect, Alex said slowly, setting the tea down. We have our flaws just like everyone else, but I think we're trying. We're learning and we're growing. Maybe that's what makes us bold, our ability to adapt, to keep going, even when things seem impossible. Lyra was silent for a moment, her gaze far away as she processed his words. I see. Earth sounds like a world of struggle, but also hope. She looked back at him, her eyes bright with an understanding he hadn't expected. I don't know. About hope, Alex replied with a small shrug. Sometimes it's hard to see through all the problems, but we try. We push forward. Lyra stepped closer, her curiosity clearly not satisfied. What about you, Alex? What do you want? Why are you here? Alex felt a shift in the air as her question hung between them. He wasn't sure how to answer. He had come to deliver a message to represent Earth in the hopes of building alliances with other worlds. But now, with Lyra standing before him, the purpose of his mission felt so much more personal. I came to make sure Earth is heard, Alex said after a long pause. We want to be part of this galaxy, not just be left on the sidelines. Lyra nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. I think I understand. You want Earth to be a part of something bigger, to matter. Exactly, Alex said, surprised that she seemed to get it. I know we have a long way to go, but I believe we can contribute. We're capable of more than people think. For the first time, Lyra smiled warmly at him. You are right, Alex. You have a lot more to offer than just your world's problems. I think ... we could learn a lot from each other. Alex felt a strange sense of peace in the princess's words. There was something about her openness, her willingness to listen, that made him feel like he had found an ally in this strange new world. Maybe, just maybe, this mistake he had made would lead to something much bigger. Well, Lyra said, breaking the silence, I'll have to make sure the others don't hear about this meeting. They wouldn't understand, but I'm glad we had this chance to talk. Alex smiled, feeling the tension in his body ease for the first time since his arrival. Me too. As he left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything. The princess, who had once been angry at him, now seemed to see something in him, something that was more than just a mistake. Over the next few days, Alex found himself returning to the palace in a way he hadn't expected. After his initial mistake, Princess Lyra seemed to take a genuine interest in him. She sought him out in quiet corners of the palace, and there, conversations grew deeper. Lyra was unlike anyone Alex had ever met. She was kind, intelligent, and had a curiosity about the world that Alex found both surprising and refreshing. Each time they spoke, Lyra shared more about her people and their way of life. She explained that her planet, while advanced in many ways, was also trapped in an endless cycle of political struggles. The royal family, including her father, held power, but it was a fragile kind of power. The empire that ruled over her world was not kind. They controlled the planet's resources and used fear to keep the population in check. We are stuck in a web of lies, Lyra had told Alex one night as they walked through the palace gardens. The air was cool, and the stars shone brightly above them. My family, they put on a show for the empire. We smile, we wave, we do what is expected of us. But behind closed doors, it's not like that. Alex had listened carefully, intrigued by the honesty in her voice. She had told him that her sisters, who seemed so perfect to the outside world, were just as trapped as she was. They had no choice but to play along with the Empire's demands. They lived in constant fear of what might happen if they stepped out of line. "There is no room for freedom here," Lyra had said, a deep sadness in her eyes. "We have no choice but to follow the rules. But I don't want to live like that." Her words had stayed with Alex long after they had parted ways. He couldn't help but think of his own world, Earth, where people fought for their rights every day. Of course, Earth wasn't perfect and it had its own set of struggles, but there was one thing that was different. The people could speak up. They could stand against their leaders if they disagreed. In Lyra's world, that wasn't possible. One evening, after a long day of meetings with the other diplomats, Alex was summoned to the palace once again. He had been expecting this. Lyra had asked him to meet her, and he knew it was something important. As he walked down the familiar hallways of the palace, his mind raced with possibilities. What could Lyra want to talk about now? When he arrived at the room, Lyra was waiting for him by the window. The moonlight bathed her in soft light, and for a moment, Alex felt as though he was seeing her in a new way. She wasn't just a princess, she was someone who longed for change. Someone who wanted to be more than what the Empire had made her. "Alex," she said, turning to face him. "Thank you for coming. I need to tell you something." Alex stepped into the room, feeling the weight of her words before she had even spoken them. "What's going on?" he asked, concerned by the seriousness in her tone. Lyra walked toward him, her expression grave. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, about everything we've talked about. You were right when you said that Earth is a place of hope. My people need that kind of hope. But we can't get it by sitting back and pretending everything is fine. The Empire won't give us a chance to change. We need to fight." Alex's heart raced. He could feel the intensity in her words. Lyra wasn't just talking about her people anymore. She was talking about something bigger. "You want to fight back?" he asked carefully. Lyra nodded, her eyes locked on his. "I've been quietly gathering a group of people who are tired of this. They want change too. But we need more. We need someone who understands the bigger picture, someone who isn't afraid of the Empire." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Someone like you?" Alex was taken aback. He had known that Lyra was different, but he hadn't expected this. "I'm not a fighter. I don't know anything about starting a rebellion." "You don't have to be a fighter," Lyra said, her voice soft but firm. "What you have is knowledge, experience. You've seen the way Earth deals with its own struggles. You know how to inspire people, how to rally them to a cause. You can help us." She moved closer to him, her eyes filled with urgency. "I need you." Alex looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had never thought of himself as someone who could lead a rebellion or make a difference in a fight against a powerful empire. But looking at Lyra, seeing the passion in her eyes, something inside him stirred. He realized that he couldn't just stand by and watch, not when someone was asking for his help. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," Alex said. "Still unsure, but I can't just ignore what's happening here. If you want my help, I'll give it to you. But I need to know what I'm getting into." Lyra smiled, a small, hopeful smile that made her look even more human. "Understand," she said. "We're going to need everything we have if we're going to succeed. We can't do it alone, but together, we might just have a chance." As the conversation went on, Lyra shared more about the people who were already part of the secret movement. They were scattered across the palace, and many of them were high-ranking. Officials who had grown disillusioned with the Empire's rule. Some were even members of her own family, though Lyra knew she couldn't count on them all. "The Empire has eyes everywhere," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But there are cracks in their armor. We have to be careful." Alex nodded, understanding the risks involved. "So what's our first step?" Lyra looked out the window, her gaze distant. "We start small. We gather support quietly. And when the time is right, we strike. We'll take down the Empire from the inside." It was a dangerous plan, but Alex felt a sense of purpose he hadn't expected. He had come here on a diplomatic mission, but now he was part of something much bigger. He was no longer just an outsider. He was in this fight with Lyra and her people. For the first time since he had arrived on this planet, Alex felt that perhaps this was where he was meant to be. The road ahead was uncertain, and the risks were high, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when Lyra needed him. The days following Alex's agreement to help Lyra were filled with secrecy and careful planning. They met in hidden corners of the palace, away from the prying eyes of the royal family. Lyra's trust in Alex grew, and she became more open about the secret rebellion that was taking shape. The task ahead of them was daunting, and both knew they had to be cautious. The Empire was powerful. It had been in control for generations, and its reach stretched far beyond the borders of Lyra's world. It controlled the resources, the economy, and even the very people. To fight back would be dangerous, and Alex was beginning to understand just how much risk they were taking on. "Every move we make must be calculated," Lyra said one evening as they sat in a small, dimly lit room. "We can't afford to make mistakes. If word gets out about what we're doing, the Empire will crush us before we even have a chance to act." Alex nodded, his fingers tapping on the wooden table in front of him. "We need allies. Can't do this alone." Lyra's eyes met his, and there was a silent understanding between them. "I've already started reaching out to key figures, people who can help us. But we need more. We need support from the people." "But how?" Alex asked. "The people are afraid. They've been under the Empire's control for so long. They don't know how to fight." "We'll show them," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll give them hope. We'll make them believe that they have the power to change their own future." It was easier said than done. The Empire's grip on the planet was strong, and many of the citizens were too scared to even think about rebellion. The idea of standing up against the Empire seemed impossible to most. But Lyra and Alex knew that the only way to succeed was to inspire the people, to give them a reason to fight. The next few days were spent in preparation. Lyra introduced Alex to a small group of rebels who had been working in secret for years. They were a diverse group. Some were former soldiers who had grown disillusioned with the Empire's rule, while others were civilians who had lost everything to the Empire's cruelty. They all shared the same goal: to free their people from the Empire's control. The group gathered in a hidden room beneath the palace, away from the royal family's watchful eyes. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a spark of hope in the air. They were about to take the first step in their plan to bring down the Empire. Lyra stood at the front of the room, addressing the small group of rebels. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice steady. "We've been living in the shadows for too long, but no more. It's time for us to rise up. It's time for us to show the Empire that we are not afraid." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement, and Alex could see the determination in the eyes of those gathered around the table. He knew that this was only the start of a long and difficult journey, but seeing their resolve gave him hope. "Each of us has a role to play," Lyra continued. "We have to work together, move quietly, and be patient.
Wow.
The Empire has many eyes watching us, but they are not invincible. They have weaknesses. We'll find them, and when the time is right, we'll strike." Alex felt a sense of pride as he watched Lyra speak. She was no longer just a princess. She was a leader. The rebellion had become her cause, and she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. He had seen this side of her before, but now it was clear that she was more than capable of leading them to victory. "We'll start by gathering information," Alex said, standing up. "We need to know everything about the Empire's movements, their supply lines, and their weaknesses. We need to be strategic." Lyra nodded. "I agree. I'll use my position within the royal family to gather intel. I'll also reach out to the leaders of the underground movement. We'll need all the information we can get." The room buzzed with activity as the rebels began to discuss their next steps. Alex and Lyra worked together to plan their first moves. They knew that the Empire was watching, but they also knew that they had the element of surprise on their side. In the days that followed, Alex and Lyra grew closer. They spent hours together, poring over maps, discussing tactics and planning their next steps. Their bond deepened with every passing day, and Alex began to see the person Lyra had become. She wasn't just a princess of a broken planet. She was a leader, warrior in her own right, and Alex couldn't help but admire her strength. But there was a part of him that worried. The Empire was ruthless, and there was a real chance that they could fail. Lyra knew the risks better than anyone, But she was determined to press forward, and Alex couldn't help but follow her lead. "Are you sure about this?" Alex asked one evening as they sat together in the palace gardens, watching the stars. "This is dangerous. We're not just going against the Empire. We're going against everything that's been built here for generations. Think the people will rise up?" Lyra turned to him, her expression soft but resolute. "I don't know if they will," she said quietly, "but I know that we can't keep living this way. We have to fight, Alex. If we don't, the Empire will continue to control us forever. I won't let that happen. Not for me. Not for my people." Her words were filled with conviction, and Alex could see the fire in her eyes. He didn't have the same burning desire for revenge or justice that Lyra had, but he admired her courage. She had lived her entire life under the Empire's control, and yet she was willing to risk everything to bring about change. "Then I'll help you," Alex said quietly. "Whatever it takes." Lyra smiled, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Alex. I couldn't do this without you." The spark of rebellion had been lit, and there was no turning back. Together, Alex and Lyra had taken the first step toward changing their world. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was filled with danger, but they both knew that they couldn't give up now. The Empire had underestimated them, and that would be their greatest mistake. The plan was set in motion. Every part of it had been carefully thought out, each detail mapped with precision. Alex and Lyra knew they had to act quickly before the Empire discovered what they were planning. The palace, once a symbol of wealth and control, had become their battleground. The stakes had never been higher, and the risk was ever present. The night before the operation, Alex couldn't sleep. He paced the quiet room, thinking about the task ahead. It had all happened so fast. What began as a simple diplomatic mission had turned into a rebellion, with Lyra at the center of it all. But despite the fear and the uncertainty, Alex couldn't deny the sense of purpose that had grown within him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something important. Lyra, too, was restless. She sat by the window, staring out at the moonlit palace grounds. Her thoughts were far from peaceful. The weight of everything rested on her shoulders. She had known what it meant to lead, but now, more than ever, the responsibility felt overwhelming. The rebellion was her idea, and it was her family that would suffer the most if they failed. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, breaking the silence. He stepped up beside her, his voice low, careful not to disturb the stillness of the night. Lyra turned to him, her face unreadable. "I have to be," she said quietly. "We don't have a choice. People are counting on us." Alex gave a small nod, trying to offer her some comfort. "Then we'll make it happen," he said, his voice firm. "We'll get the people the freedom they deserve." Lyra smiled faintly, though her eyes held a mixture of fear and determination. "I hope so." The time had come. The plan was simple. They would strike at the heart of the Empire's control in the palace. There was a key event scheduled the following evening, a royal gathering that would include several important officials from the Empire. It was the perfect opportunity. While the Empire's attention was focused on the celebrations, Alex, Lyra, and the rebels would make their move. They would break into the palace's vaults, seize important documents, and free the prisoners the Empire had been holding. But that was only the beginning. The real goal was to send a message to the Empire that they were not untouchable. Were not invincible. Lyra had gathered a group of trusted rebels, men and women who had worked with her in secret for months. Each person had a role to play. Some would create distractions, others would infiltrate the palace security, and a few would escort the prisoners to safety the night of the operation. Alex stood in the shadows, watching the guards patrol the halls of the palace. His heart raced in his chest. Every noise felt louder, every movement seemed more noticeable. But he knew that they couldn't afford to hesitate. They had to move quickly. Lyra was at his side, her face set in determination. She had changed into a simple, dark outfit that allowed her to blend in with the rebels. She was no longer the princess, but a leader of a revolution. In this moment, she was a warrior, and Alex was right there beside her, ready to help her take back her world. "We're almost there," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. She gave Alex a quick glance, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of confidence and fear. I'm right behind you, Alex replied, though he felt a sense of unease creeping in. They were about to do something that would change everything. If they succeeded, it would be a huge blow to the Empire. But if they failed, the consequences would be disastrous. They reached the vaults, where the Empire kept its most sensitive information. The doors were guarded. Alira's insider knowledge had allowed them to find a secret entrance one that would lead them directly into the heart of the vaults. With the help of the rebels, they made their way inside, silently and swiftly. Now, we take everything we can, Lyra said, her voice steady, though her hands were shaking slightly. We need to expose the Empire's corruption. The people need to see the truth. Calyx nodded, following her lead. He didn't know the full extent of the Empire's control over the planet, but he knew enough to understand that the documents they were about to take would change everything. The people would finally see the Empire for what it was. Powerful, corrupt force that had no regard for those they ruled over. The rebels worked quickly, gathering the documents and loading them into bags. As they moved through the vault, Alex's eyes kept darting toward the walls, half expecting someone to burst in and catch them. But they were careful. Every move had been planned. They had to trust in the plan. Once the documents were secured, Lyra gave the signal. "Time to go," she said, her voice low. They moved through the palace like shadows, avoiding guards and slipping through secret passages that only Lyra knew about. It was exhilarating, the rush of freedom, the feeling that they were doing something right. But Alex knew that this was just the beginning. They had to make it out of the palace without being caught. They reached the secret exit where the rebels were waiting. The plan had worked. But just as they were about to leave the palace grounds, disaster struck. A group of palace guards appeared, rushing toward them. The rebellion was no longer a secret. The Empire had discovered their plot. Lyra's heart raced as she looked at Alex, panic rising in her chest. "We have to go," she shouted. But the guards were closing in fast. There was no way to escape. "Without a fight, we'll cover you," one of the rebels said, his voice calm even in the face of danger. He stepped forward, his weapon raised, ready to defend the escape route. "You go. We'll hold them off." Lyra hesitated, but Alex put a hand on her shoulder. "You have to go. The people are waiting for you." With a final look, Lyra nodded and turned to run. Alex followed closely behind her, the sound of footsteps echoing in the dark hallways. The palace was waking up to the rebellion they had started, and there was no going back as they emerged into the night air. Alex could feel the weight of what they had done. They had broken free from the Empire's control. But now, the real battle would begin. The fight for freedom was only just starting. The night had been a blur of chaos and fear. As Alex and Lyra ran through the dark streets, the weight of their actions hung heavy. The rebellion had started in the shadows, and now, as dawn began to break over the city, it was no longer just a quiet whisper. The Empire knew that something had happened, and they would stop at nothing to find those responsible. Lyra's heart raced as she sprinted ahead, her thoughts spinning. They had done it. They had taken the Empire's secrets. They had struck a blow to the heart of their oppressors. But the cost of success was always high. They had to be ready for what would come next. Alex was right behind her, his breathing fast and steady. He'd never imagined that his life would turn into this. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission to deliver a message had become something far greater. Now they were running for their lives. Lyra glanced back, making sure the rebels were still behind them. They had successfully escaped the palace, but there was no guarantee they would get away without being caught. The Empire had eyes everywhere. "We need to get to the safe house," Lyra said breathlessly, her voice tight with urgency. She had learned the hard way that the Empire had spies everywhere, and they couldn't afford to be careless. Alex nodded, his eyes scanning the streets. The city was still sleepy, the streets empty as the first rays of sunlight lit up the sky. The safe house was close, hidden in the heart of the city. It was a place where they could lay low, regroup, and plan their next move. As they turned a corner, they saw the familiar door of the safe house. Lyra knocked quickly, and the door swung open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the air cool and stale. The rebels were already there, waiting. Lyra didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We got the documents," she said, holding up the bag. They had carefully packed with the stolen Empire files. Now we need to figure out what to do with them. The room was silent as the rebels crowded around her, eager to see what they had stolen. The documents were more than just pieces of paper. They were the key to understanding the Empire's power and corruption. It would change everything. One of the rebels, a former soldier named Malik, stepped forward. "We need to get this information out to the people. Empire's been hiding the truth for too long. If we can show them what they've been doing, the people will rise up." Lyra nodded. "I agree. But we need to be careful. If the Empire knows we have these documents, they will come after us. We have to make sure we send the message without giving away our location." Alex felt the weight of the moment. The rebellion was no longer just a small group of rebels working in the shadows. It was growing, and the risk was growing with it. But he knew that they couldn't stop now. They had already come so far. There was no turning back. "I think we should get the information out through the media," Alex suggested. "If we can hack into the Empire's communication system, we can send the documents to every news outlet, every corner of the planet. The people will hear the truth." Lyra thought for a moment. "It's risky," she said. "The Empire controls most of the media, but it might be our only option. We'll need someone with the skills to hack into their system." Malik, who had been quietly listening, raised his hand. "I can do it," he said. "I've been working with underground networks for years. I know how to get around the Empire's security." Lyra looked at Alex, her eyes full of determination. "We're doing this. Let's send the message." The team quickly made plans to execute the mission. Malik would take the lead on the hacking, while the rest of them would stay on guard and prepare for any Empire retaliation. They had to move quickly and stay hidden. The more time they wasted, the higher the chance that the Empire would find them. As the hours passed, tension filled the air. Every second felt like it was dragging on, and Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of what they were about to do. If they succeeded, they could change the course of history. But if they failed, the consequences would be devastating. Finally, Malik stood up from his station, a grin spreading across his face. "It's done," he said. "The message is out. The entire planet will know what the Empire has been hiding." Lyra let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We've done it," she said quietly. "Now we wait." The next few hours were the hardest. They stayed in the safe house, listening to the distant sounds of the city. The Empire's. The reaction was inevitable, and they knew that they would be hunted. But Lyra and Alex also knew that the spark of rebellion had been lit. The people would know the truth. They would be forced to act. By morning, the first signs of change began to ripple across the city. People in the streets were whispering, their faces lit with disbelief as they read the news reports about the Empire's corruption. The documents they had stolen were being shared, passed from person to person, spreading like wildfire. "We've started something," Alex said, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "But this is only the beginning." Lyra smiled, though it was a weary smile. "Yes, but it's a beginning that cannot be undone." The Empire, once untouchable, had been exposed. The people were waking up. Lyra knew that their fight wasn't over, but this was the moment they had been waiting for. The rebellion was no longer a whisper, it was a roar. The Empire would have to face the truth. "We have a long road ahead of us," Lyra said, turning to Alex. "But we've taken the first step." Alex nodded. "Together, we'll make it to the end." They were no longer just a princess and a diplomat. They were leaders of a movement that would change the galaxy. And nothing, not even the Empire, could stand in their way now.